My name is Karen. I'm 56, and I got kicked out of my son's wedding by the bride in front of 200 guests, including half my extended family, her rich dentist father, and my son's childhood best friend, who wouldn't even meet my eyes as I left. Have you ever been told to leave your own child's wedding? If something like this has ever happened to you, drop it in the comments. If you're into stories like this, hit like and subscribe. It really helps, and I'd love to have you here. I didn't yell, didn't make a scene, didn't ask why, or beg to stay. I just walked out, but not before I heard one sentence that told me everything I needed to know, something I was never supposed to hear. But before I get there, you need to understand something. I didn't come from drama. I raised Jason alone from the time he was 4 after his dad took off. I worked 2 jobs, first at a bank as a teller, then nights at the customer service desk at Target to keep him in school, to get him those shoes he wanted, to send him to prom in a proper tux. And when he got into college, I cried so hard in the parking lot that I had to lie and say my allergies were acting up. So no, I didn't expect him to marry someone like Marissa, the kind of woman who never had to use coupons or take public transportation, who thought my Honda Civic was cute in a vintage way. But I accepted it. I smiled. I brought flowers to the engagement dinner, and I offered to help with planning. I got shut out fast. At first, it was little things. I wasn't invited to the dress fitting. She said it was just bridesmaids and immediate family. I wasn't listed on the website under mother of the groom. Just her mom and her dad in a paragraph about how much they supported her. I didn't say anything when I asked Jason about it. He said not to take it personally. You know how she is, he said. She gets stressed about appearances. That's how he described it, stress, like it was a valid excuse to erase me from everything. Still, I bought a dress. Pale blue, long sleeves, nothing flashy. I didn't want to look like I was trying to compete. I got my hair done at a nicer salon than usual because the one in my neighborhood was closed for renovations. I had my nails done in a soft pink and even spent the night before in a hotel, so I'd be nearby and not risk being late. I didn't sleep much. I kept worrying I'd forget the card, the gift, or that I'd trip walking to my seat. You don't understand unless you've been the single mom trying to do everything right. You always feel one wrong word away from being labeled difficult or dramatic. I arrived at the venue right on time, not early. Marissa specifically told me not to come early. We'll be doing pictures and the girls will be half-dressed, she said, like I was some kind of intruder. So, I respected it. I pulled into the lot, checked my makeup in the mirror twice, held my gift tight against my chest, and walked toward the garden where everything was set up. I saw the white chairs, the floral arch, the minister standing off to the side.
People were seated.
I was already chatting when I saw her mom standing near the front in a cream-colored gown that was just shy of bridal.
She didn't look at me.
I spotted an open seat in the second row. Not the front row. I'm not that arrogant, and started heading toward it. That's when Marissa appeared, stepping right into my path like she'd been waiting for me. Her makeup was heavier than usual, and her mouth was pulled tight. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Her tone wasn't confused or surprised. It was rehearsed. I smiled, thinking maybe she was joking. "I'm here for the wedding," I said quietly. She didn't smile back. "You weren't supposed to come," she said flat, like it was a fact, not an insult. I blinked. "What are you talking about?" "We revoked your invitation last night," she said. "Didn't you check your email?"
Ich zerrte her.
I hadn't. I was getting dressed, trying to calm my nerves. Who the hell checks their email the night before their only child's wedding? "You can't be serious," I said. "Jason's my son." She folded her arms and replied, "We decided it would be less stressful this way. You've made this whole thing harder than it needed to be." I looked behind her. Jason was standing near the groomsmen, half in shadow. He looked at me and then looked away, didn't say a word, not even a hand gesture, nothing, and that honestly hurt more than anything Marissa said. "You told your own mother not to come to your wedding?" I asked, louder than I meant to. People turned. Her mother stepped in beside her and rested a hand on her arm. "It's best you leave now before we have to make a bigger deal out of this," she said. I looked around. Every pair of eyes felt like a spotlight. I was the show now. The woman too sad, too loud, too desperate to realize she wasn't wanted. My throat closed. I swallowed hard.
Fine, I said.
If that's what you want. It is, Marissa said quickly, and her mother nodded. I turned without another word. My hands were shaking. My legs felt like they might give out. I passed two guests I knew, friends of Jason's from high school, and they gave me these little pity smiles like I was some drama they didn't want to get involved in. When I reached the edge of the garden, I passed by the path where vendors were unloading last-minute things, and that's when I saw Marissa's father on the phone. He wasn't trying to be secretive, just pacing back to the ceremony area, talking fast. As I passed, I caught a single sentence. As long as she doesn't talk, we're in the clear. That was it, just that, but it landed like a hammer because I'd seen something a few months back, something I didn't think was a big deal at the time. A document with Jason's name on it and another name I didn't recognize. A shared bank account that had no reason to exist. I thought it was a mistake, I never asked. But now it all clicked. They hadn't just excluded me because I wasn't wedding pretty enough. They were scared. And in trying to erase me, they made the biggest mistake of all. They made me pay attention. I went straight back to the hotel room I'd booked for the night, sat down on the edge of the bed, and just stared at the carpet for an hour. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt. God, it did, but because I felt something else rise up, stronger than sadness. I felt clarity, like my brain snapped into focus for the first time in years. I thought about Jason, how he looked away when she told me to leave. That wasn't just nerves. That wasn't a man caught in the middle. That was a man who made a choice. I laid back on the bed, fully dressed, shoes still on, and thought through every moment from the past year that now suddenly made sense. When Jason told me he was dating Marissa, I tried to be polite. She was very polished, the kind of woman who always had perfect nails and called wine grape forward. She never asked me a single question about myself. Every time we had dinner, I felt like a charity case. She'd smile too wide, laugh too politely, and then look at Jason like, "Can we go now?" I remember once offering to help with the wedding invites. She told me, "It's okay, we're using a design service. It's kind of complicated if you're not used to it." Like I didn't know how to use a website. Another time, I asked if I could bring Jason's childhood photos for the memory table. She said, "We already picked the theme. We're doing minimalism. It's just a cleaner aesthetic." What she meant was there was no space for anything personal that didn't fit her Instagram vision. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I'd been gradually shut out for months. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being erased. And I let it happen because I told myself I was being respectful. But respectful shouldn't mean invisible. Then there was that one strange thing I'd pushed out of my mind, the shared bank document. About 6 months ago, Jason had asked me to grab his mail while he and Marissa were away on a trip. I'd brought it inside, sorted through it on his kitchen counter, like I'd done 100 times before when he was in college. One envelope was half open from a private bank. I saw his name on it, and under it another name, Clarence McDowell. I don't know why I remembered that exact name, but it stuck. It wasn't Marissa, and it wasn't any friend or relative I knew. The account had a balance of over $110,000, which was strange because Jason had told me he'd taken out loans for part of the wedding. Asked him casually later if he had a joint account, and he said no, just no, no explanation. I let it go. Now I wish I hadn't, because the sentence I heard at the wedding, "As long as she doesn't talk, we're in the clear," connected something. I didn't know what yet, but I felt the heat in my chest. I wasn't angry anymore. I was alert. I left the hotel the next morning, still in my gown, hair a mess, no makeup on, and drove straight home. I didn't tell anyone what happened, not even my sister. I spent the whole day pacing, not knowing what I was supposed to do. Called Jason. Demand an explanation? But why bother? He'd already. I pulled out my old laptop that afternoon and Googled the name Clarence McDowell. Nothing came up at first, just a few obituaries and a car dealer. But then I tried Clarence McDowell plus fraud, and the first result was a PDF of a court filing from 2 years ago, a civil suit about identity manipulation and property flipping. The name was buried in a list of shell companies. It wasn't proof, but it was a thread. I spent the next few hours trying to stay calm. I wasn't trying to build a case or get revenge. I wanted to know what they were hiding. Why Marissa, her parents, and Jason all suddenly treated me like a threat. If I was a harmless, out-of-touch mom, they could have ignored me, but they didn't. They silenced me. That meant something. I started going back through everything: emails, text messages, voicemails. Marissa had always been careful. There were never any written conflicts, just long silences and vague, polite refusals. But one thing stood out. The day after Jason proposed, he texted me a photo of the ring. I'd replied, "She looks happy. I'm proud of you." A minute later, he sent, "I'm glad you're on board." That sounded off. On board. Like it was a deal, not a relationship. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up researching shell companies and joint accounts. I felt ridiculous and paranoid, but also too deep to stop. I remembered one more thing: the time Marissa came to my house just once, right after the engagement. I'd offered her tea. She refused. While I was in the kitchen, I caught her at my bookshelf, holding one of my tax folders. She smiled and said, "You're so organized." At the time, I thought it was just awkward small talk.
Now, I wonder if she was looking for something.
That thought kept me up the entire night. The next morning, I called an old friend from my first job at the bank, Danielle. She'd gone on to become a compliance officer for a private financial institution. I asked her if she could help me understand how someone might use joint accounts to hide money or names. She hesitated, asked what was going on, and I said, "I think my son's being used, and I think I wasn't supposed to see something I did." She agreed to meet for lunch. When I showed her the partial screenshot I'd taken of the account months ago, her face changed. She said, "Karen, this is structured to look legitimate, but it's not. That second name, he's listed as a silent cosigner. That's usually a red flag in these setups." I asked what kind of setups. She said, "Usually fake business fronts, real estate, sometimes identity swaps. People use relatives, partners, anyone they think won't ask questions." My stomach turned. Jason wasn't stupid, but he was gullible when it came to people he wanted to impress. I started to wonder if he even knew what he'd gotten into. I didn't tell Danielle everything yet. I needed more. I went back home, pulled out old emails, printed screenshots, and started a folder. I labeled it just in case, but deep down, I knew what I was doing. I was getting ready, not for revenge. For exposure. I wasn't going to let them paint me as the crazy mother who couldn't let go. I was going to be the one who saw through the lie they told me to disappear. I was going to do the opposite. I was going to dig until the whole damn thing came out. It took me another week to admit to myself that I wasn't just looking into a weird financial document anymore. I was investigating my own son. That realization felt like swallowing broken glass, but I couldn't unsee what I'd already connected. I wasn't looking for problems. I wasn't trying to ruin his marriage. I wasn't acting out of jealousy or resentment, like I knew they'd accuse me of. I just couldn't stop myself from digging because the more I found, the less sense anything made. After that lunch with Danielle, I didn't sleep much. I kept going over what she said: silent cosigners, fake fronts, identity swaps. I didn't even know those were things people actually did. That night, I pulled up a spreadsheet and started laying everything out. I listed every date, name, account number, and snippet of memory I had. I made a timeline. It started looking less like paranoia and more like a pattern. Jason had opened that account shortly after meeting Marissa, not before, not randomly, right after. That's when I remembered another weird thing. He suddenly started dressing better: suits, expensive watches, even a new car lease that didn't fit the salary he told me he was making at the time. I figured Marissa's family must be helping out. I told myself maybe they were loaning him money, or maybe she was just a good influence. But now I thought, no, this was about image, fronting, pretending things were fine, so no one asked questions. I kept going back to that name, Clarence McDowell. It wasn't just on that one bank document. I remembered now there was also a piece of mail addressed to that name at Jason's old apartment back when they first moved in together. I even joked about it once, saying, "Did your neighbor's mail end up in your box again?" He laughed it off and said, "Yeah, probably." But now I didn't believe that anymore. I called the leasing office, pretending to be verifying tenant history, and asked if a Clarence McDowell had ever been on the lease. The girl at the front desk hesitated, put me on hold, then came back and said, "I can't release that information, sorry." She sounded nervous. That told me enough. I printed that timeline, slid it into the folder, and decided I needed more than just hunches. I needed something undeniable. So I went through Jason's old boxes at my place, the ones he'd left when he moved in with Marissa. In one of them, I found an old external hard drive. I plugged it into my laptop, and at first it was just college files, essays, photos from spring break, tax documents. But then I found a folder labeled Invoices 2022. Inside were dozens of PDFs. Most were typical invoices for freelance design work, consulting services, but two files stood out. One was from a company called CBM Consulting Group for $2,025, $500. Another was from EQ, Winox Logistics for $37,000. Neither had a real address. I Googled both company names and came up with nothing. Blank shell. It looked like real paperwork, but it was hollow. I printed those too. Then I did something I wasn't proud of. I drove to Jason's place while I knew he'd be at work. I still had a spare key from when he first moved in. I told myself I was just going to look around, not touch anything, not open drawers. That didn't last. His home office looked pristine, too pristine. No clutter, no cords out of place. But his trash can was full. At the top of the pile was a crumpled envelope from a law firm with the name Baxter and Lane on the corner. I fished it out, flattened it. It was addressed to Marissa, not Jason. Inside was a letter confirming the finalization of a name change from Clarissa McDowell to Marissa Lane. I froze. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Marissa Lane wasn't her birth name, and she changed it legally only 8 months ago after the engagement. That wasn't normal. That wasn't romantic. That was tactical. I took a photo of the letter with my phone and put it back exactly where I found it. Then I opened his filing cabinet. It wasn't locked. There were tax files, pay stubs, and a manila folder labeled legal. I opened it. Inside were copies of NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, with 3 different names. I scanned them. They were dated over a period of 2 years and signed by Jason. No mention of what they were for, just vague language about proprietary data and personal agreements. The names of the signees weren't Marissa or Clarissa. They were random. Janine something, a Michael, and one just initialed RT. Why would my son have NDAs with unrelated people? I didn't take them. I just memorized the structure. When I got home, I started thinking about motives. What did Marissa gain from this marriage? What did Jason get? And what was I being kept away from? Because that's what this was really about. They didn't want me at the wedding not because I was embarrassing, but because I was dangerous to their setup. I might ask too many questions. I might remember too much. I might see the wrong person walk in and recognize them. It wasn't about family. It was about exposure. And the more I thought about that day, the look on Marissa's face, her mother's posture, the way Jason didn't say a word, the more I knew this wasn't something I could ignore. It wasn't about whether I forgave Jason. It wasn't about whether he loved me or not. It was about what they were hiding and what kind of life they were building it on. And if they thought I'd keep quiet just to avoid rocking the boat, they picked the wrong woman. I was done playing supportive. I was done hoping he'd come to his senses. I was going to pull the thread until the whole thing unraveled, starting with that name change. I already had a friend who worked at the city records office. I called her the next morning and asked for a favor. She pulled the name change file and confirmed what I'd seen. It had been fast-tracked and legally approved with supporting identity verification documents that looked off a passport issued in a different state, a utility bill from an address that no longer existed. I asked her if she could send me copies. She said she wasn't supposed to. I said it might save someone's life. She didn't ask questions after that. When I hung up, I realized I wasn't just snooping anymore. I was sitting on something serious. This was fraud, identity manipulation, possibly financial laundering, and my son, whether he knew it or not, was in the middle of it. I sat down, opened the folder I'd been building, and added a new section labeled Proof of Identity Fraud. Then I sat back and looked at everything I'd gathered. I wasn't ready to act yet, but I was getting close, very close, and they had no idea what was coming. I didn't sleep for 3 nights after that, Not because I was scared, but because every time I closed my eyes, I replayed every conversation I'd ever had with Jason over the past 2 years, analyzing his tone, his words, and all the little things I'd dismissed before.
I was seeing it all differently now.
He wasn't just distant. He was controlled, conditioned, managed. Like every step in his relationship with Marissa had been pre-planned to keep him isolated, compliant, and comfortable enough to stop asking questions. Or maybe he was never that innocent. Maybe he saw the money, the lifestyle, the image, and looked the other way. That thought made my stomach turn. I kept telling myself he was still the boy who used to bring me wildflowers from the schoolyard, who once cried when I worked 3 nights in a row and forgot to sign his permission slip. But the man he'd become, the one who stood silently as his fiancée kicked me out of the wedding I helped raise him toward, was someone I didn't recognize. That's when I decided I couldn't afford to wait for more clarity. I had enough. I just didn't know where to take it. I knew I couldn't go to the police with half a folder and hunches. I needed someone who'd believe me, help me understand the legal ground I was standing on, and protect me from accidentally ruining everything by saying the wrong thing. So I called Lisa, a woman I used to work with at the bank 15 years ago, who later became a financial investigator for a private firm. We hadn't spoken in years, but I still had her number saved. She picked up on the second ring, and after a few awkward minutes of catching up, I told her, I think my son is being used in a marriage that's part of something bigger, fraud, maybe laundering, and I think he either knows and is covering it, or he's being manipulated. Either way, I have documents, and I need to know what I'm looking at before I make a move. She didn't laugh. She didn't tell me I was being dramatic. She just said, "Can you send me everything you have?" That night, I scanned every document I'd collected. Screenshots, emails, the fake invoice PDFs, the name change letter, even photos of the NDAs and the bank statement with Clarence's name. I put them in I labeled it Family Trust, and sent it over. Lisa called the next morning, and her tone had completely shifted. "Karen," she said, "you're not imagining this. What you have here, if these documents are real, points to an operation, not just a marriage scam, a real setup, possibly part of a larger scheme." She asked if I knew any more names. I told her about the NDAs, the names I saw, the weird shell companies, and the offshore-sounding accounts. She said, "I need to run this through someone I trust." I told her to do what she needed, but to keep my name out of it until we knew what we were dealing with. I wasn't just protecting myself. I was protecting Jason because even if he'd knowingly walked into this, I couldn't shake the idea that he was in deeper than he knew and probably thought silence was the safest route. People think silence is neutral. It's not. It's a shield and a weapon, depending on who's holding it. I stayed home that week, barely leaving the house, checking my phone every 10 minutes, waiting for Lisa's next update. When it came, it wasn't good, but it was what I needed. She called and said, "The name Clarence McDowell has come up before in a different investigation years ago tied to immigration rackets and stolen identities. Not enough to charge, but he disappeared off the radar. It's likely not even a real name." And the companies on those invoices? They're part of a known template used in front scams. We're talking international fraud, Karen. I felt sick and vindicated at the same time. This wasn't just some shady tax trick, it was serious. I asked her what I should do. She said, "You need to stop digging on your own. You've already done more than most people ever would. If you go to the authorities, go with a lawyer, and if you're not ready for that yet, then protect your evidence. Keep backups, keep it safe, and don't confront them directly, not yet." That last part was the hardest. Every time I thought about Marissa's smug face at the wedding, about her standing there telling me I wasn't welcome at my own son's biggest day, I wanted to drive to their apartment and throw every page of evidence on their kitchen table and watch her fake innocence shatter. But I didn't. I held it in because now I had the one thing they never thought I'd have. Leverage. Real leverage, not gossip, not emotion, but truth, verified, organized, and ready. That weekend, I made 3 copies of the drive. One I hid in a fireproof box, one I gave to Danielle, and one I mailed to myself in a sealed envelope with a signed date. So if anyone tried to claim I'd faked or fabricated anything, I had a time-stamped copy, unopened and ready to go. I also wrote a letter to Jason. I didn't send it, I didn't even finish it. I just needed to write down what I would say if I ever got the chance again. It started with, I don't know if you're a victim or a participant, but I know you're in something that could destroy you, and I can't protect you from it unless you let me. But you didn't just shut me out. You erased me, and now I'm the one person who knows what's coming, and I don't think you realize how fast it's going to hit. I closed my notebook after that. Lisa called again on Monday. She said, there's someone I trust at the federal level. No promises, but if you're willing to meet, I can set it up. I told her yes, not because I was ready, but because waiting any longer felt like complicity. I didn't know exactly what the feds would do or what part Jason would play in their version of events, but I knew that if I kept this secret just to protect my own heart, I'd be doing exactly what Marissa expected me to do. Nothing. And that was never going to happen again. The next day, Lisa sent me the address of a private office and said to bring everything. No names, no handshakes, just to sit down with someone who knew how to listen. I packed the folder, the flash drive, my notes, and I walked into that meeting with my back straight and my hands steady because for the first time since that humiliating wedding day, I wasn't confused or emotional. I was prepared. And if Marissa thought I was going to disappear quietly, she was about to learn what happens when the person you erased becomes the only one who knows the truth. The moment I stepped into that meeting, I knew there was no turning back. The man I met wasn't flashy, didn't introduce himself with a title or badge, and didn't waste time with small talk. He sat across from me in a plain gray office, nodded once, and said, "Let's see what you've got." I handed over the folder and the flash drive, and for the next hour, he combed through everything: name change documents, fake invoices, joint account screenshots, emails, even the scanned NDAs. He didn't say much, just took notes and highlighted sections, and every few minutes he'd give this small grunt, not of surprise, but recognition, like he'd seen versions of this before. When he finally looked up, he asked me one question. "Do you believe your son is aware of this entire setup?" I told him the truth. I didn't know. I couldn't say yes because I still held on to the idea that Jason might have walked into something he didn't fully understand, but I couldn't say no either, not after seeing how complicit he looked standing there silent while his wife humiliated me in front of everyone we knew. The man nodded again, closed the folder, and said, "We'll take it from here, but you need to understand something. If this turns into a formal investigation, your name might come up. Are you prepared for that?" I said yes before he finished the question. I didn't care anymore about appearances or awkward family dinners or what people might think. I cared about exposing what they tried to bury. He told me to sit tight and not reach out to Jason or Marissa. No contact, no warning, no reactions if anything strange happened. I agreed. I left the office that day and felt like I'd handed off a bomb. Someone else now had to decide whether to defuse or detonate. I went home and waited. It didn't take long. Less than 2 weeks later, I got a call from Lisa.
"Something's happening," she said.
"Whatever you gave them, it's moving fast. They're not telling me much, but you might want to brace yourself." I asked what that meant, and she just said, "Watch the fallout. Don't blink." The next day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. It was Jason. His voice was shaking, angry, scattered. "What the hell did you do?" he yelled. "What did you send?
"Who did you talk to?"
I didn't respond right away. He kept going. "Marissa's accounts are frozen. Her parents are being questioned. I'm getting calls from people I don't even know asking about my finances. You're trying to destroy me." I stayed calm and asked him one question. "Did you know she changed her name?" He went silent, not for a second, but for a full 5 seconds. Then he said, "It's complicated." That told me everything. "You knew," I said. "You knew about the fake companies, the joint accounts, the name change, all of it, and you stood there and let her throw me out of your wedding like I was nothing." He said something I'll never forget. "I didn't think it would matter." That was it. I didn't think it would matter, like my place in his life was optional, a footnote, something he could erase to keep the illusion going. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said, "Well, it matters now, doesn't it?" He hung up. No apology, no defense, just dead air. I sat in my kitchen and waited for the guilt to hit me, but it didn't. All I felt was clarity. A few days later, it all started unfolding publicly. Marissa's company, whatever shell of a brand she'd built, announced a temporary pause on operations. Her social media accounts vanished. Her father's dental practice had a staff restructuring. The pieces were falling in real time, and I didn't need to lift a finger. People started talking. I heard from an old friend who worked in local finance who said her firm had been contacted by investigators about two of the fake companies Marissa used on Jason's invoices. One of Jason's groomsmen reached out to me, someone who hadn't spoken to me in years, and said, "Karen, I don't know what's happening, but it's everywhere. People are saying she used a stolen ID to get a visa." Is that true? I didn't confirm or deny. I just said she made a lot of choices, and now they're catching up to her. And then came the worst call. Jason again, this time crying, not yelling, not blaming, just sobbing into the phone like a lost child. "They're going to arrest her," he said. I didn't know how far it went. I swear, Mom, I didn't know everything. I wanted to believe him, but then he said, "Can you fix it?" And I knew he still didn't get it. He still thought I was there to clean up his mess, like I hadn't been cut out, discarded, humiliated. I told him, "Jason, you told me I didn't matter, and now the only reason any of this is being stopped is because I paid attention, not because you did the right thing, but because I refused to stay silent." He tried to interrupt. I didn't let him. "You made your choice. You don't get to pick me back up now that everything's broken. I tried to warn you, you ignored me. You chose her. You let her walk over me. You let her erase me from my own family." He said I was scared. I said, "So was I." The difference is I did something about it. That was the last time we spoke. I haven't heard from him since. I don't know what happened next in full detail. I wasn't given a play-by-play, but I know from Lisa that formal proceedings were underway. I wasn't listed in anything publicly. They protected me just like they said they would. But the story started leaking in pieces. Articles, rumors, statements from financial institutions about fraud prevention. In all of it, I saw the same pattern. Marissa's name, her aliases, the shady companies, the undocumented transfers. Jason was tied to it. Maybe not legally yet, but in public opinion, definitely. I was out of the picture now, and not in the way they planned. They wanted me erased. Instead, I became the only reason the truth came out. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't feel victorious. I felt relieved. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't pretending my son was the same boy I raised. I wasn't pretending Marissa was just misunderstood. I wasn't pretending that keeping quiet made me the bigger person. It made me complicit, and now I was done. They burned the bridge. I lit the rest of it on fire, and I didn't look back. Months went by after everything collapsed, and life didn't snap back to normal. It settled into something quieter, something lonelier, but also clearer. I wasn't getting updates from Lisa anymore, and I stopped asking. I figured if anything major happened, she'd let me know. But I didn't need play-by-plays. I'd done my part, and whatever consequences came next were no longer mine to carry. I didn't feel like a hero, and I didn't want pity, but I also wasn't going to act like I regretted what I'd done. The truth is, I never wanted revenge. I just wanted respect. I wanted a place at the table, a seat at the wedding, a few photos on the damn memory board. I didn't want to destroy anyone, but when they pushed me out and tried to pretend I didn't matter, they forced me to pay attention. And when I paid attention, I saw what they'd spent years trying to hide. I went back to work part-time at a tax prep firm because sitting at home was driving me nuts, and I started walking every morning just to get out of my own head. Nobody in my life really knew what happened except for Danielle and Lisa, and that was how I preferred it. People assumed Jason had gone quiet because he got married and moved on, and I let them assume. I didn't want to explain the whole story to people who only cared about the gossip. I wanted to rebuild without having to relive it over and over. But even with all that effort, there was still a hole where Jason used to be. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the silence. After I hadn't heard from him since that last call, I didn't expect to. I figured he was either laying low, trying to salvage what was left of his name, or maybe he'd convinced himself I was the enemy and didn't deserve another word. I accepted that. I didn't forgive it, but I accepted it. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. I was folding laundry when the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and standing there was a woman I didn't recognize. She looked to be in her late 20s, holding a small child, maybe 4 or 5 years old. The woman said, "Are you Karen?" I said, "Yes." Cautiously, she said, "I'm Sophia. I used to be married to your son." For a second, I thought I misheard her. "You what?" I asked. She said, "I was married to Jason overseas. He never divorced me. I found out he got remarried on social media and traced the address back to you." I stepped outside, completely thrown. "And this is?" I asked, looking at the little boy. She said, "Your grandson." I didn't speak. I just stared. She continued, "I'm not here to cause problems. I just thought you should know Jason and I were together for 5 years. He left when he said he got a job in the States, promised he'd send for us. He stopped answering my calls. I filed for abandonment. Never heard from him again." My mouth went dry. "Why now?" I asked. She said, "Because my son deserves to know where he comes from, and because I saw your name in a few articles linked to the investigation. I figured if anyone would tell the truth, it'd be you." I asked if she wanted to come in. She said yes. We sat in my kitchen. She was calm, polite, not bitter, just exhausted. She showed me photos, documents, even an old marriage certificate. There was no doubt Jason had been married before and never told anyone. And the boy. He had Jason's eyes, no question. I couldn't believe it. After everything, after the lies, the fraud, the way he erased me, now I was sitting across from a daughter-in-law I never knew existed and a grandson who'd been hidden just like I had. I asked her what she planned to do. She said, "I just want him to know his family. I don't need money. I'm not here to sue. I just want someone in his life who won't disappear." That sentence hit hard. I nodded and told her I'd like to be that person. She smiled. "That's what I hoped you'd say." Over the next few weeks, they started coming by more often. I set up a little bedroom for the boy. I bought a car seat. I learned how to make the dishes he liked. I never once told him bad things about his father. I just said, sometimes grown-ups make choices that don't make sense. He was too young to need more than that. And Sophia? She became a friend, not out of pity, not out of trauma bonding, but because we understood each other. Two women who'd been lied to, discarded, and left to clean up someone else's mess. We built something quiet but solid, a new kind of family. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for an apology. I didn't care if Jason ever called. I didn't care if Marissa vanished from the planet. I didn't care if people whispered behind my back because I had my life back. And in a strange way, I had more than I started with. I had the truth, I had peace, and I had a little boy who called me Nana and hugged me like I was the safest person in the world. So no, I didn't get justice in a courtroom. I didn't get a grand public apology, but I got something better. I got to stop pretending. I got to take all their lies and turn them into something good, and I did it without screaming, without threats, without revenge. I did it by listening, watching, and refusing to disappear. They tried to ruin me. Instead, I walked away with everything that matters, and I'm not looking back.